Everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Wicked Darkness. Please make sure to follow us so you can keep listening to our episodes. If you want to see more of us, give us a like on Facebook and Instagram, as well as our YouTube channel, Soup Hit 2009. Hi, I'm Kathy, and welcome back to another episode of Wicked Darkness. Tonight with me, I have Soup Hit members Brian and Leah with me. How are you guys?
Good evening.
Hey.
Good. How are you?
Good. Tired. We had
Yes.
walks last night and Friday night,
On
son.
Friday?
Yeah, I'm a little tired, but a good tired, I got some mileage in. So, yeah, it was a positive weekend and going right into Halloween for us this week. So
And
next
you've had a
week-
long week personally, too.
Yeah.
A little tired.
I'm a little tired. Mentally, physically,
Yes.
a little drained. And my week is technically just beginning. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. But when people listen to this, they're gonna be hearing about Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oof.
Yeah. So we this kind of hits kind of close to home for us because Jeff was in our area. And when he came out, when I'm saying came out, when he was arrested, I personally was in high school at the time. So I remember all the news that was buzzing around about him. I remember back then I did not want to buy any chocolate from Milwaukee because I just didn't know what was in the chocolate. Being a naive person, I didn't know any better. I was a teenager, 15, 16, 17 years old. I'm like, I don't know, is he bringing whatever he has? And no offense to any victims, family members or anything like that, but I just didn't know. And I saying that wholeheartedly that I was naive, but at the time I just had no idea what Dahmer was capable of doing or what he did. So I kind of tried to stay away from all that. He's not from Milwaukee though. Grandma lived in Milwaukee, and that's what brought him here. But he had a strange history, and I know a lot of people has probably watched. Have you guys watched the Netflix
No, I haven't.
series?
Of course.
Okay, I did it. I watched it. I was supposed to watch it with Scott, but my coworkers started talking about it, and I'm like, okay, stop. I haven't heard any of this. I haven't watched any of this. So but I mean, people that have known about Dahmer, I mean, even if you talk about the show, not saying the show is accurate 100%, but it hits on a lot of, spots of what had happened in the past. I was like, I guess I have to watch this. And it gave me a different perspective, not of Dahmer himself per se, but also of the victims and their families and what they had gone through. Because I guess I just missed that when all that was happening. And I don't know about you guys, if you remember any of that. I mean, I remember the footage of them bringing out things out of his apartment complex.
Styrofoam coolers of just duct taped yuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think I paid attention that much of the trial itself.
Yeah.
So I mean, I took a little bit more of an appreciation when it came to watching the show because they did dive into the trial portion of it, of his tapes, the Dahmer tapes.
Yeah.
Which was part of his.
Did the Netflix go into both of his trials or just one where he got actually convicted?
It was just the one that
Because he had two.
Did he?
Yeah. Did you know about that? He got released. He got wasn't it like a home,
yes.
a home arrest, but he got out like 10 months.
They So they did touch on that one. I totally forgot about that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, they did touch on that one a little bit. But they didn't go into huge depth over it like they did with the big trial.
Mostly his prosecution of it.
Yes.
Of the crimes, yeah.
Yeah. And then the tapes are with him, and so that was released, and she kind of tells her story of how she was dealing with things with him, and how she not that she felt sorry for him, but she got a little bit more attached because she got to know him as a person. But it doesn't, she's not forgiving what he did, but she learned more about him, that she didn't know before. But let's go back to the very beginning time period of Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, who, like we said, he was born in Ohio, in 1960. So, Leah, you've been following Dahmer a little bit more than the rest of us. Can you start telling us a little bit about him?
About Dahmer
Yeah.
himself? Okay. He had a fun little childhood. I would say of all the, I shouldn't even say all, of most of the serial killers, you know how you always hear, terrible childhood and things of that nature. I honestly did not see his childhood as terrible as maybe some others had it. His parents stayed married for a very long time, but his dad was heavily involved in his education and work.
Right.
So he wasn't home a lot. Mom had more of like a mental illness going on. I don't remember what she was diagnosed with. I think it was just like major depressive disorder, possibly. I know she was postpartum at one point.
Yeah. Because he has a little brother.
Daniel, yeah.
Daniel. And what's the age gap? Do you know what the age gap is between him and Daniel?
I believe it was 6 years.
So that's not much.
No.
Yeah.
But I would say of his upbringing in Ohio, I don't know why I said Daniel. It's David.
David, yes.
David.
Started with a D. We were right.
Right.
Good guess.
He changed his last name anyway, so I mean, he's probably happy that we got his first name wrong.
Not that I blame him, but
right.
So I would say mom was not that nurturing, mothery type of mom. More standoffish, somewhat annoyed by Jeffrey. Not like nurturing, almost neglectful. Right, like almost neglectful to a point. Like, he's fed, he's clothed. That's all I need to do. Here's TV. Bye.
Right.
Just kind of that upbringing, and dad just wasn't home a lot.
Right.
There is some talk that there might have been like some physical abuse in there. I wouldn't doubt it, but I don't know to really what extent. There's a lot of different sources that say different things.
Right. Which he ended up being kind of like a shy child too.
He was very shy, incredibly quiet.
Mm-hmm. And almost like the odd man out for everything, it seemed like.
Right. He didn't seem to fit into like anything, like
right.
any group, clique, anything like that. He just was never that one that kind of gets in there.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading an article like he was became, after the birth of his younger brother, he had started to become distant, more subdued, more I don't care, whatever disengaged.
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, his mom was more physical, like not physical as an abuse, but more compassionate and passionate towards his little brother.
Correct.
Versus
brother
him.
had, I would call, more love.
Yeah.
He had more love from mom than Jeffrey did. It was like David was like the favorite kid, I guess.
Yes.
Well, no, you get that thinking you're not wanted.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just uncanny how all this stuff is very similar in a lot of these serial killers. It's the same
Yeah.
upbringing, it's like I said with that game this reminds me so much of Richard Kuklinski. It's the same crap. It's the same stuff.
And what makes me sad is, Jeffrey had always had some random, I wouldn't say thoughts of killing, that came later, but he always had just different thoughts. Got interested in more of a sciencey kind of biology dissection type of animals. And his dad kind of helped him with that. But I think his dad was just trying to take some sort of interest, because everything that they have tried with Jeffrey, any groups they put him in, clubs or whatever, he just had no interest and didn't want to do anything. So when his dad heard he was like a little interested in this biology thing and dissecting, he really grabbed that and said, all right, let me teach you some stuff. And it wasn't to be in a bad way.
Right.
And I think Dad has gotten quite the dirty rap about it. Like, why would you teach him that stuff? Because in the end, no parent is going to think to themselves, my kid's going to be a serial killer because he's interested of what's inside an animal's body and how things lay.
That's science.
Right. Because I mean, they do
Might
it in
be a
biology all
doctor.
the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Could have been a doctor. Could have been, anything in science that
Right.
relates to animals. There's no way his dad would have known that.
Mm-mm.
Right. Well, he
So
could
there
have
was a
even
lot of
wanted to
guilt.
go into forensics too.
Exactly.
There was a lot of guilt built there.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I don't think that's where Jeffrey's mind was going at that time either.
Right.
I think what really made him snap, to be completely transparent, was the divorce when he was much older, and then when his mom picked up and just left.
Right.
So like after, I think he was about 18-ish, where he was done with school, and mom and dad divorced. Dad moved to a motel that wasn't too far away and was still checking in on the family and still trying to see Jeffrey and David and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But mom picked up with David and like left, and Jeffrey came home one day and nobody was there.
Right.
And he just lived in that house completely by himself.
Yeah,
And I
and
think
Dad forgot to check on him on a regular basis at that point.
And he eventually came to check on him when there wasn't any phone calls being answered. He couldn't get a hold of the mom. He just started getting like, all right, I'm just going to stop over there because I don't know what's going on. And when he got there, Jeffrey was there with some other people, and he kind of cracked the door open, and Dad walked in there, kind of kicked everybody out. There was like alcohol going on and stuff like that, but he noticed that there was barely any food in the house. The place was a mess.
Living the bachelor life.
Yes.
Right. And here's Jeffrey just kind of going, hi, and then like, hey, where's your mom? I don't know. Oh, when's she coming back? I don't know. And I think that abandonment really is like what finally did that trigger.
Right.
Because if you look at his later crimes, a lot of it had to do with not wanting to be left.
Right.
He did not want to be left by anybody.
Right. He was used to Dad being gone, but Mom was always there, even though she wasn't there emotionally for him, and supporting him like a mother should. Physically, she was always there. So you're right. When he lost that, when she disappeared and left without coming back ever again, and his brother's gone, everybody in his life has just abandoned him in these four walls, and he doesn't know what to do.
I can't imagine how that would feel.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
he
terrible.
loved his parents.
Yeah.
He loved his mom, but she just didn't know how to return it back to him.
Right.
Or even if she wanted to, I don't know. There was just never that connection, and that could have been that postpartum, that she was just never able to connect with him.
Right.
And it just never clicked. And it was that baby of, I have this child, and now I don't know what to do with this kid because I don't feel love for this kid or anything. I don't feel anything for this child. And as a mother, I don't understand it because I never went through that, but I know other people have. But I think back then mental health wasn't what it is today.
No.
I mean, it's not perfect today by any means, but I think that it was still so new in the process back then that nobody knew how to really deal with it. She didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't know what was going on with herself. So, and if a doctor doesn't know what's happening, how do you fix what's wrong with you?
Right.
So her way was, okay, you're grown. You can be on your own now. So bye.
Yeah.
But then he started getting more and more in trouble.
Right, because it was shortly after Mom had left.
Mm-hmm.
Very shortly after Mom left, did he have his first victim.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, had already killed his first victim, Stephen Hicks, by the time his dad realized that he was living on his own, and then moved himself back into the house with his then girlfriend that he moved on to after the divorce.
Right.
So Stephen Hicks was his first murder.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve was hitchhiking. And I believe Steve was 18 years old and hitchhiking to a concert where him and Dahmer met. And there was talk of like, hey, let's come over to back to my place. And I think Dahmer had said in one of the confession tapes that they were smoking weed and drinking. And eventually Steve was like, hey, I got to get going. And that somehow triggered to the, well, no, I don't want you to go because, again, Mom just left. David is gone. His dad is gone. He's in this house by himself. Here's this guy that he feels kind of attraction to that he's not allowed to have attractions to guys. That was not allowed in his family.
Right.
And so that was a very quiet thing about him. And then it would just kind of happened where Dahmer's like, just killed them. And I don't think that wasn't a planned event. He just did, and then ended up burying him in like a well or pipe in the backyard and kind of like stuffing him in there.
Yeah. But then didn't he freaked out, and was Steven that he had chopped him up and put him in garbage bags?
Correct. And he put them under the house, but his dad was starting to smell something under the house and said that he was going to crawl under there because he thought maybe there was a dead raccoon or something.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeffrey's like, no, I'll take care of it. Let me do it, because he knew it was down there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he moved him to like that pipe thing or drain well of some sort.
Yeah.
And wasn't found then until the 1990s. And this happened in the late 70s.
Yeah. And then he was trying to like break up the bones and stuff like that because he just didn't know what to do. He was freaking out. And so he was trying to take it, I believe, up onto the rooftop and trying to get like the wind to catch the particles.
Mm-hmm.
It just didn't work. Yeah. And so everything that he was trying it just wasn't working. So, but then he started getting in more trouble and stuff like that. And Dad told him, you gotta go to the military. And then
he was getting into like the drinking. Drinking was a big issue with him. Then he had that sexual assault charge.
Well, he was drinking in high school though, too.
Yeah, he was drinking as a teenager.
Yeah.
And kind of developed the drinking addiction.
Yeah. And then there was the jogger that he kept an eye on.
Yeah, still in Ohio. I think that was prior to his Stephen.
Yeah.
I believe it was prior. So like the idea was in his head.
Right.
He really had like this crush on this jogger that kept coming by.
Right.
And just was like one day like and he didn't want to even kill the person. He wanted to knock him out so he can just lay with them.
Right.
Like just lay and like cuddle with them or something. It wasn't to kill them necessarily.
Did he ever come out and say he was homosexual?
Yeah.
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 Eventually.
Okay. Yeah.
But at the time, he didn't do that because it wasn't something that they talked about.
No, not back then.
Yeah.
And his dad, even in his book, had said that he would not have accepted that out of Jeffrey and allowed it.
Right.
That's just not how the family was and how the raising was happening.
So then he got in trouble. And then his dad said, "This is enough out of you. You need to go into the military. That'll straighten you out." So he thought. But then
It
while he
did
was
at
in the
first.
military, yeah, it did at first, but then the
Yeah.
drinking became a problem again.
Again, yeah.
Because, when you're in boot camp, you're stuck. They're not going to let you just roam around or whatever. But
Right.
once you're in for a while, you have more freedoms and you can, leave the base. You can do other things on your downtime. And his was drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And he also had some problems besides drinking. He had some sexual assault stuff happen with some of his fellow soldiers too.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't really talk about it. They didn't want that to be known. I mean, and I get it, because you're in the military and you just been assaulted by one of your fellow soldiers. How do you tell people that, but again, he didn't hurt them, like kill them. They lived to tell
Right.
their story.
Right.
But still the damage was done.
Yeah. But I believe he had like a child molestation because there was one under 18 that he like touched.
Yeah.
And that he went back home and told his family or his parents. So that charge got on him too.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually he was just removed from the military, but I do believe he still had a honorable discharge, if I remember correctly. It wasn't dishonorable.
Really? You would think that would be dishonorable, though, because he's got these charges against him, but
Right.
I don't know. So then he gets in trouble from that, and Dad says, again, we don't know what to
He
do.
discharged in 1981.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was honorably discharged.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's surprising.
Yeah. So at that point, Dad had remarried, and to the girlfriend.
Yep.
He had come and lived with them for a while, but still having problems, still drinking and stuff like that. And Dad had enough of it. We don't know what to do with you anymore. You keep getting in trouble. You get these charges against you. We're going to send you to Grandma. Grandma will straighten you out. She's, God-fearing, Christian, and we're going to send you to her in Milwaukee. And that's how Dahmer ended up coming to Wisconsin and living with Grandma. And Grandma, she didn't know any better. It's her sweet Jeffrey, he's innocent.
They were actually very close.
Yeah.
Him and Grandma. He loved his grandma very much.
Right.
There was definitely a close relationship between them. But
I don't think she realized that she had a monster brewing.
Right. And he was doing some weird stuff. And of course, going out to like the bars that he was going out to and the dance clubs. But then he still had that want to touch and feel. And he had a thing for chest, like a male chest. That was like what he liked the most about males.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had stolen a mannequin and was hiding that in his grandma's house.
Right.
Something that he could just like snuggle up with. And until Grandma found it, and then
can you imagine Grandma walking into the bedroom and there's a mannequin laying in the bed, all covered up, snug and warm? Like, what is happening in my house? How did he get this mannequin in here without being noticed? I mean, I understand if they come apart and all that. I mean, I get that, but
right,
just poor Grandma. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more about Grandma and all her endeavors with Jeffrey. And then unfortunate downfall of Jeffrey and his mental status and the poor victims themselves. Yeah. So we're going to come back. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. All right, well, let's get back to Dahmer. So, Grandma finds the mannequin in the bed. I can't even imagine. I mean, we have mannequins around our house, but that's for Halloween time. So, there's never been a mannequin other than on a stand somewhere. So Grandma must have, I don't know how she did not have a heart attack or a stroke at that moment when she pulls back the covers and sees a mannequin sitting or laying in her grandson's bed. And the thoughts that went through the woman's head of why is there a mannequin in my grandson's bed and a male mannequin on top of it, no clothes on. So, and I guess that was his way of having some kind of control in his life of a male presence, even if it was plastic. Because he still didn't have any friends, where he lived at Grandma's house in Milwaukee. So he never, I mean, he went out to the bars, and stuff like that, but it's not like he had like a long time friendship. There are some kids from high school and, growing up in Ohio that he was friends with and stuff but he was always that odd kid, that people would talk to him, but then he would say something and then they didn't know how to react to him. But it wasn't something like, he had these long-term friendships with. So even in Milwaukee, he's living with Grandma. Grandma's trying to get him to go to church and he doesn't want to go to church. He just wants to live his life and he's just got a place right now with Grandma, so that he doesn't really have to pay rent or anything like that. But again, he's bringing people home to Grandma's house without her permission or knowledge. These strangers that he doesn't even really even know that he's finding on the streets and talking to these people, and and his way of coming back to having these people be around him is he's drugging these people.
Yep.
And do you know what kind of medications that he was giving these people? I don't know offhand what he was giving them to knock them.
He was giving them. I couldn't find that either.
I think it was just sleeping pills, to be honest.
Yeah, he'd crush them up, put in their drink, and kind of. They were still somewhat awake, somewhat, conscious, but they were still drugged up enough.
Right. Trazolam.
I just saw that too. Basically, it says once he rendered his victims unconscious with sleeping pills, just like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Triazolam.
Somehow, some way, he started killing them while in Grandma's house, correct?
Yes, he killed 3 in Grandma's house.
Because she never really went into the basement too much, and that's kind of where he.
That was his slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He killed and dismembered bodies in Grandma's basement, and was kind of experimenting with acid in his grandma's basement. There is one person that made it out of Grandma's house, and he believed that it was likely because Grandma knew he was there. She didn't know these other guys were there, so it was Dextator, Guerrero, and Sears were the 3 that died in Grandma's home.
So
there was one.
The one that Grandma saw that he wasn't acting right and kind of was like, okay, we need to take care of him, make sure he gets home.
Yeah, right. Because he had something happen to his car.
Yes.
Dahmer went to go check on him and, see how he was doing and kind of coaxed him back to his house. But then Grandma came in to the room.
And he ended up going to the police, though. And he filed like a report against him.
Right, because I think he was trying to like touch him or something.
Yeah. And he was able to tell them where Dahmer lived.
Right,
They never really took him seriously.
Mm-mm.
right.
And you know, I mean, I have a cousin on Milwaukee Police Department now. And so no disrespect to the police department, but back then they failed the system. They failed the people through the system. You know,
Yeah.
they really did. And it's a shame. I mean, that is kind of like a black mark on MPD
Yep.
back then.
And they said if they would have, was that the one where if they would have just done a basic random search, they would have seen all this the first time they were? Is this
Yeah.
the victim?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
they didn't do that. Yeah, I think
no,
that's
because didn't he even had like an altar to Satan that
yeah.
Grandma found, which made her very upset and stuff like that because, you know, like I said, she's a God-fearing woman,
Hmm.
Christian woman that goes to church, you know, and was trying to find the good in everybody. And then she finds this in her grandson's, you know, or in her house,
Right.
but made by her grandson. And then I don't know if it's true or not, but there was a box that was in, and I don't want to give everything away for people that haven't seen the thing, the Netflix thing, but there was supposed to have been like a family box, a family heirloom or whatever that she had pictures in, and she ended up giving that to Jeff. And then he took it, and he almost got caught by his dad at some point too. But somehow, some way, he was always able to come up with an excuse,
Talk his way out of it.
talk his way out of everything. And for whatever reason, people believed him. And it's his dad. He wants to think the best of his child. I get that. But even in the back of his dad's mind, I'm sure he had it where he's like, something's not right with my child. You know, something's off. And I don't understand it, you know. And like people say, when they smell death, that smell is very distinctive. And, you know, I've smelt it and I know what it is, you know, where I've gone on scenes in the past where, you know, patients have been deceased for weeks. And it's a very, very distinct smell that will stick with you. And you know what that smell is when you smell it. So I can just imagine what her basement smelled like, that, you know, and I get that he was trying to tell them that it was animals and stuff like that were down there, but there's a distinct smell to a rotting corpse.
Decomp.
The decomp, when it starts to rot and everything, and I get that it's in the basement, but still sometimes in the basement it gets warm too, but it's still, the body starts to decompose and it reeks.
I had read an article too that said that he passed that off as like rancid, expired meat, and they accepted that. You know, they were like, okay, you know, no big deal, I'll get rid of it, and that's all they will.
Yeah, that was when he moved out of Grandma's and he got his own apartment.
Oh, the smell came from. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
So you fast forward, you know, Grandma finally said enough is enough. I love you, but I can't keep you in my home anymore. You gotta find your own place. And so, he ends up finding an apartment, and the apartment that he finds was for low income because that's what he could afford. And he worked at a chocolate factory. Before that, he worked at a little butcher shop and stuff like that. Not that he used that for anything. Just he did his job. That was about it from what I've gathered. But then he moved into this apartment, and he was friends with some of the neighbors. And it doesn't seem like that in the Netflix show, but there was a gentleman that lived across the hallway from him that he actually was friends with. And like he was down on his luck at some point. One of his family members had some problems or whatever. And Jeff ended up giving him money to buy them a present, I think it was at that point. And, and he was helping this gentleman out, and they were friends. And he had been over in the apartment a couple of times, and that's where, they talk about, what is that smell? And he's like, oh, well, my freezer went out, or my fridge went out. And, then there was those smells. But then too, it seemed like once he started going to the bars more, and bringing these people back, it's like he lost control of I guess you would call it an animal inside him. Like, he just didn't know what to do to stop it. And he ended up, we were talking about, the two trials. Well, the one trial was for where is he from? Laos, I think.
Laotian. Yes,
yes,
he was.
So it was for him. He survived, but his thing was he'd sit there and say he was going to take pictures of you. Here's $50. I'll pay you $50 and let me just take pictures of you. And the kid was down on his luck. His family didn't have a lot of money, so he's like, okay, I'm going to do this for my family. And so he did that, but then it turned weird. And so he was able to get out of there, and they did file charges, and that's where he went for court for that time. And basically got away with a slap on his wrist.
It says here in September of 89, Dahmer had an extremely lucky escape. An encounter with a 13-year-old Laotian boy resulted in charges of sexual exploitation and second-degree sexual assault. He pleaded guilty, claiming that the boy had appeared much older.
Yeah. But so he ended up surviving, and then Dahmer started going to these other places, these bars, and then they had these bathhouses that they would go to, and he would take these men that he would see at the clubs and everything, take them to the bathhouses. But then that's where he started drugging these people and doing stuff. And he, again, just a little bit longer. I want to just lay here with you. Why don't you want to lay here? No, I got to get up. I got to go to work. I got to do this. I got to do that. And that irritated him. And he was just like, no, I want you to stay here. And he would start, beating these people up. And then, he got kicked out, like, out of the bathhouse. The owner was like, that's it. I don't want you here anymore. I don't want your business. I don't want you coming in here anymore. These people that are coming in with you, that this guy is bad news and you should get away from him as soon as you possibly can. So that was like the end of his bathhouse. So then he had to start bringing him back to his apartment, and it kind of just snowballed. And that's where, he ended up killing these gentlemen that, age range was all over the place. No older than mid-20s, you would say. Youngest one was 14. I don't remember the oldest, how old he was. But there's, a total 17 victims that he ended up killing. But to me, it was kind of weird because he still had the bodies in his apartment. The apartment was not that big. Bedroom, bathroom, the kitchen, dining room was pretty much attached to the living room. It wasn't big at all. And he had bodies in there, like he couldn't get rid of them fast enough at some point. So he'd bring somebody home and there'd already be a dead body in, like, the bedroom. There were bodies that were in the bathtub while he would take a shower. It was insane of the things that were happening in this apartment. And then he literally started shutting people out that were in the apartment. And there was one woman that lived next to him, and the smell was coming into her apartment. And she kept calling the police, and they never really took her seriously. She ended up being also the one with her daughter and niece, I want to say it was, who saw the 14-year-old, who was the brother of the original guy that he went to court for. It was his brother. And he ended up drilling into this kid's head because he figured he can make him into a zombie. Because this is something that he was told when he was younger, that you can do that and then pour acid into the hole, and there wasn't any nerve endings in the brain, and so you're not really going to feel anything. And it's sickening to think about these things, that this is what was going through his mind at this point. But this kid had a hole in his head. He had poured some stuff in his head, but he ended up leaving to go get some more alcohol. He went and got some beer at the local liquor store. So he left this kid in the apartment half naked because he had taken some pictures. Because again, it was one of those, you need money, here's $50. I'll take some pictures of you and then you can get another $50. And the kid knew who he was. He's like, you don't know who I am. No, I don't know who you are.
14 to 32.
32. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
But he doesn't remember who this kid was. And the kid knows you went after my brother, but we need money. So I'll do whatever I have to do to, bring home some money for my family. So this kid was alive, walking around. He was able to get up out of the bed, get out the door, go down the hall, go down the stairs. And this woman that lived next to Dahmer, she was outside with her daughter and niece. And this kid was sitting there and he was naked. And they put a blanket on him and they call the cops. And the cops come there and Dahmer comes up at the same time. And that's where he's like, well, this is my boyfriend. And they're like, are you kidding me? This is a kid. And the cops are looking at him. And this is why I say the MPD has a black mark on their record. Because these guys looking at this kid are thinking that, yep, this is an adult and this is a homosexual relationship. And at the time, they didn't want to deal with that. And so they went back into the apartment and oh, yep, we saw pictures. They're lovers. And they said everything is fine. And the woman called the police department after the police had left. She had gotten their number, like their patrol car number and everything. And the guy answered and he's like, yeah, that was me. And she goes, well, what's happening? Oh, it's all taken care of. And she's like, but what happened to the boy? No, that's his boyfriend. They were consensual. She's like, he's bleeding. No, it was fine. Everything's fine. He's back where he's supposed to be. And then they hang up on her. And that it's mind-boggling. What were these two police officers? I get that they're in an area, they're probably overworked, like most police officers are, overworked, underpaid. But you failed this kid and his family in a major way. You brought him back to his killer. And Dahmer went back and
instantly, almost like instantly killed him. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he thought this was going to work. He was going to have his own zombie that's going to be able to interact with him and do what he wants him to do. And then it didn't work because he was able to get up and walk away. It failed. So then, okay, we're going to drill some more, put some more, acid in his brain. And that actually ended up killing him. And it seemed like it just snowballed from there. And there were, like I said, there's just killing after killing after killing. And these poor family members had no idea what their sons were going through.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he even went after somebody that was deaf.
Yeah, that was Hughes. That was the oldest one.
Yeah. And it seemed like they had a little bit of a relationship from the series. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened, but in the series, it shows that they somewhat had a relationship.
Well, it's because Hughes was like kind of initially like declining, Dahmer in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And Dahmer learned a little bit of sign language to communicate with him.
Yeah.
Um, and Dahmer resisted using drugs on him to try to like nurture this like almost natural connection that they had.
Hughes was the one that wanted to be a model, right?
I believe so.
Okay.
Anthony Hughes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he always did the sign of I love you in sign language, the thumb, the index finger, and the
Yeah.
pinky. And that was his way of telling everybody that he loved them. And that was like his mom's thing. Like he was a mama's boy. So
Oh
mom
yeah.
got concerned when he didn't come home. And Hughes was telling people that he was, going out to this bar and he's talking to this person and whatever. And and again, it was I don't want you to leave. And then he left and he was going to let him go, it seemed like. And then Hughes came back because he had forgotten keys or something. And again, this is from the series. I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but in the series, this is what they had said. So I'm sure that this part was made up in some sort of way. But one thing is for sure, Hughes ended up going back into Dahmer's apartment at some point. And that's where he said, I don't want you to leave. And he killed him. And so Hughes was there on his bed. I mean, he had bloodstains on the mattress.
Yeah.
And the people that would come in, his future victims could smell the death in the place. And nobody questioned that he had a 50-gallon barrel in his living room where he's got acid in it. Nobody's going to question it. And he had like, what, 3 bodies inside that barrel?
Yeah, on all different stages of decomp.
Nobody's going to sit there going, hey, why do you have a barrel? A big blue barrel in your apartment.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to stand out to you and go, it's kind of fishy, man. Or the blood stain. We're all males here. Granted, I'm not saying that you can't bleed as a male. I'm not saying that. But the amount of blood that was found on that mattress, that would make me question things.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just that. He had finger marks of blood on like walls and on the pillows. And I mean, how do these guys keep going in there? I mean, he was drugging them, but still nobody questions. The police doesn't question that it looked weird. And it wasn't until another gentleman had gotten drugged by him and he had handcuffed him, but he ended up getting loose and he was able to get out, and that's how Dahmer got caught.
Mm-hmm.
And
what bothers me is there was that 14-year-old that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But Dahmer had a 14-year-old victim well before that one. Back in the 80s, that was one of the 3 that was killed in Grandma's home.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saddened that one doesn't get talked about more. Like, if anybody's going to remember any of Dahmer's victims, it's going to be the 14-year-old that got away.
Right.
And got returned because that was a really bad mark on the MPD.
Mm-hmm.
But not much talking happens about, was it Dox Tater, I think is how you say it, or Dox Tater? That he was 14 as well.
Mm-hmm.
And actually one of the more earlier victims. And I'm kind of sad that one isn't spoken about more often and remembered as much as the second 14-year-old.
Right. It seems like there are not more, but there are certain victims that stood out during the trial and everything. And there were some that, like you said, their names have been forgotten.
Yeah.
And their stories have been forgotten. And unfortunately, these families, and I feel for these families, and I struggled doing this podcast about Jeffrey as well. But, and I know the families, they for the Netflix thing, they tried to reach out, supposedly, allegedly reached out to the family members to try to find the history and the story, their story of what had happened. And none of the family members wanted to talk to the Netflix people. And I understand it. You don't want to keep dragging this up, but then too, you don't want these people to be forgotten either.
Right.
And unfortunately, it seems like, it's been 30 years and these people some are even more than that. We're talking like 40 years, almost 50 years, and they're getting forgotten. And that's sad, and it seems like Jeffrey is not forgotten, but his victims are forgotten.
Right.
That's how it usually is, though.
Yeah. But those family members are stuck with the loss, and then they have to relive it every time. And that's why I struggled with this, going, do I really want to do this? Talk about this and make it more known to people about what had happened? And I'm like, you know what? People need to realize that, there were more things going on besides just Jeffrey Dahmer. There were these victims, and there were the holes that had happened and the black marks that had happened. And it's sad, like, especially for the woman that kept calling, and the guilt that woman must have. And not that she did anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong. She did what she was supposed to do as a citizen. She kept calling, but she was not heard. It was like, yeah, lady, all right, we got it. Mm-hmm. And we kind of just forget about it. And so she just, what she must have felt, she hears what's going on. She can hear the tools being used and stuff like that in the apartment next door, the smells that were coming out, and you feel helpless. What do you do? And I'm sure she's got PTSD, and I'm sure the family members do too. But it's just sad that these people, like I said, are just being forgotten, these victims. So then Jeffrey got caught. He goes to court. He wants to be killed.
Yeah.
He wants the death penalty.
Yep.
But unfortunately, here in Wisconsin, we don't have the death penalty. We haven't had that for a very, very long time. But he wanted it. He wanted to die. He wanted to know what was wrong with him. He knew there was something wrong with him. He just didn't know what it was. And then, he had to listen to all the victims' family members say their piece. And then he didn't say anything until the end, where he was supposed to say something. He did say, I wish I could die. I want to die. And he ended up getting life over and over and over for all those victims.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ended up going to prison. Now, this is where I'm not sure what actually happened in prison. So he lived in prison, and he was up in Waupun, I believe, where he was an inmate and living out his life sentence. But there was rumors that he was making gestures, making statements about the food that he was eating, and how it was like
he would take his food and shape it
yeah.
in body parts.
Right. And I don't know if that actually happened or if that was a fictional thing. That was one of the rumors.
The person who killed him had said that was one of his triggers too.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he did what he did. Right.
But then it was kind of weird because Dahmer ended up getting killed in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically got killed the way he killed his first victim. Because his first victim, he used weights from like the dumbbells. Mm-hmm. And they were cleaning in the the gym area or exercise area or whatever, bathrooms and stuff like that by that area. And he was killed though with one of the weights.
And the guards left.
The guards left.
Left. They
Why would
knew
the
this.
guard leave?
They
Why?
knew this was coming.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so they say, no, that's not what happened. But it just seems weird that the guard he was supposed to be there the whole time. There's 3 of them there. It was Jeff and the man that killed him and another person.
That he also killed.
Yes, he killed both of them. Correct.
Yeah. And so where was the guard?
Yeah.
The guard should have been in there the whole time, but he wasn't.
Right.
He ended up leaving.
I knew years ago, I knew a girl whose brother was a guard in Grand Marsh in the jail there. And he had told me years ago, child molesters and child murderers, when you're in prison, you are in a group by yourself. You are targeted. You know, the murderers, the rapists, all hang out together. They don't care.
Right.
But it's kind of a written law in jail. You touch kids, you're on your own.
Right.
And whatever happens to you happens. And I think that had a lot, this guy was a target at a prize trophy for all the other inmates.
He was by himself. And then he had told his defense attorney that he wanted to be put in general population. Yeah. And she was adamant, don't do it. That you're not going to live long if you do. And no, I'm going to do that. But then he asked to be baptized. And so he did. He got baptized while he was in prison.
They said he found God in prison.
Found God. Yeah.
They don't tend to do that.
Yeah. And so he had asked to go back go into general population, and then not even a year, I don't even think it was that long, maybe not even 6 months, I don't think. And he was dead. And then he, I don't know if the victims got any not satisfaction, but any kind of closure of his death, or realize that he's not going to suffer like their family members suffered, one of those things. Almost like he got out easy. But did he really? I mean, he was beaten to death too. So I guess karma came back at him, I guess, if you could say that. But then he wanted to have his body cremated. But Mom wanted his brain to be analyzed. So him and his mom and his dad were going back and forth. They went to court about his brain. Because mom said no. I want his brain to be analyzed. What is wrong with this kid of ours? And Dad was saying, no, we're going to cremate him. That was his wishes. All of them, all together. And then Dad ultimately won. So he ended up getting cremated. So there's nobody can study his brain, see what was wrong with him. If there was anything wrong with his brain, was it normal? Was it abnormal? Who knows? So, I mean, it closure, but not closure, I guess.
Right. And I felt bad for Dad. I mean, I couldn't imagine being a parent in this situation. And just the trauma, the heartache as well. And I know Mom couldn't withstand the guilt anymore. And eventually died. I think Dad admitted some faults that he realized he made when he thought he was not making mistakes. And he finds out later in life, as he went through life, like, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have been around more. Like, you find the things that you did wrong, possibly as a parent.
Right.
You question yourself.
Yeah. Right.
And everyone does it. Every single person that has a kid does it.
Right.
It's
But
hard to write, you know.
like you're saying, Leah, he's gotten a bad rap. I mean, parents, we make mistakes with our kids. We try not to, but we're human. We make mistakes, and you know, his parents made mistakes, and now his dad lives with that. And he's got to, you know, deal with that, and you know, he's trying to make amends, but he doesn't know how to.
Right.
So, as sad as this topic is, unfortunately we're out of time, and
And you could talk about this for
we
3
could
days.
we
You
could
know, this is a huge, you know, this is a big one.
yeah. So I think we're gonna close this one out, this chapter out, and we're gonna leave this as is, and hopefully the family can have some closure now that everything is done, not just us, but just in general, that they can have some peace and live their lives out. So we're going to say goodbye to everybody. And thank you for listening to Wicked Darkness. For our skeptics, keep us grounded, and for our believers, keep believing. So I'm Kathy.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Happy November too.
Yay.
November.
Yes.
All right. Until next week. Bye, guys.
All right, guys. Good night.
Good night. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please email us with your thoughts on this and any of our previous episodes. And if you have a topic you'd like us to talk about, email us at souphit@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to another episode of Wicked Darkness.